The first thing Malcolm Hayes heard was laughter. Preston Whitcomb stood beneath the chandelier, smiling like the joke had already landed, and announced that the black single father in the plain white shirt had been paired with Evelyn Whitcomb, the white-haired woman in red, the oldest woman at the blind date charity dinner. Champagne glasses paused in midair. Diamond bracelets caught the light. A phone rose beside the centerpiece, already recording. Malcolm knew what one wrong expression could cost him. His job at the Whitcomb Grant, his daughter's scholarship, the dignity he had spent years teaching her not to trade for a seat in any room. Then he saw the small red car beside Evelyn's plate, its corner bent toward the camera, two cruel words handwritten across it: charity seat. Preston waited for anger or shame. Malcolm did neither. He placed one hand over the card, pulled the chair back, gave Evelyn the kind of gentle smile no one in that room had expected, and asked softly, "May I sit here? If you were in that room, would you sit down or walk away? Drop where you're watching from, and subscribe if you believe dignity still matters when nobody is clapping." The question hung there longer than the laughter had. Around the table, people leaned forward the way wealthy people lean forward when they expect entertainment, but do not want to admit it. A woman in silver lowered her glass just enough to watch Malcolm's face. Behind Evelyn, one of Preston's friends stared with his mouth open, as if Malcolm had broken a rule no one had spoken aloud. The man near the floral arrangement kept his phone steady, waiting for the moment a poor man made himself smaller on camera. Preston's smile stayed perfect, but his eyes sharpened when Malcolm did not look embarrassed. Evelyn did not smile at first. She sat very still beneath the chandelier, her red dress making her look powerful from across the room and painfully alone from up close. Her gloved hand tightened around her napkin. Then, almost before she seemed to realize it, her hand moved to her chest. Not fear, not exactly. More like surprise, touching an old bruise. Malcolm saw that too. He saw the way no one at her own table had moved to cover the card. He saw the way the empty chair beside her had been angled toward the room, not toward her, as if the real guest at the table was humiliation. And he understood the test in front of him. If he refused the chair, they would laugh at her. If he took it badly, they would laugh at him. If he said nothing, the card would keep speaking for both of them. So Malcolm sat down carefully, keeping his palm over the red card, as if shielding a small flame from wind. The chair legs whispered against the polished floor. The room lost another layer of noise. Preston took one step forward, just enough to remind everyone he was still controlling the game. "Mr. Hayes," he said, light and loud, "you do understand this is part of tonight's pairing exercise." Malcolm looked up at him, calm, straight-backed. Then the exercise can start with respect. A fork touched a plate somewhere and sounded louder than it should have. Evelyn's eyes moved from Preston to Malcolm's hand, still covering the card. For the first time, her face shifted. Not trust, not gratitude. A pause, a question. Then she leaned slightly closer, her voice low enough that only Malcolm could hear. "You saw what they wrote, didn't you?" 12 hours before Evelyn Whitcomb whispered that question, Malcolm Hayes was standing in a kitchen so small he could reach the stove and the sink without taking a step. No chandelier, no champagne, no red seat card. Just the tired hum of the refrigerator, a cracked phone on the counter, and an electric bill folded twice, as if making it smaller could make it easier to face. Lila sat at the table in her school sweater, coloring a paper rose with a red marker that was almost dry. Malcolm slid the last clean pancake on her plate and kept the broken one for himself. She noticed. She always noticed. "Daddy," she said, pointing with the marker, "yours got hurt." Malcolm poured syrup over the torn edge and smiled. Still sweet. The smile cost him more than he let her see. Beside the bill lay the Whitcomb Foundation scholarship form for Lila's art program, the deadline circled in blue. It was not just a form to Malcolm. It was Saturdays in a real studio instead of printer paper at the kitchen table. It was brushes he did not have to choose over groceries. It was a door his daughter deserved to walk through without hearing money lock behind her. He had read every line twice before breakfast. He read school forms the way other men read warning signs, slowly, carefully, because small print had teeth. A missing signature could close a door before a child ever reached it. Lila pushed the paper rose toward him. One petal was crooked. The stem was too thick. On the back, in purple marker, she had written, "Daddy, don't let people make you small." Malcolm read it once, then looked toward the window like the morning light had suddenly become important. Lila saw the truth anyway. "Are you scared to go tonight?" He rinsed the pan before answering. He did not like giving fear too much room in front of his daughter. "I'm careful," he said. "That's different." She nodded, as if she understood more than a child should. "Mom would make you wear a tie." His hand stopped on the chair. For a second, even the old wall clock seemed quieter. Then Malcolm nodded. "Your mom believed in looking people in the eye." By late afternoon, he was back at the Whitcomb Grand as the night maintenance supervisor, tightening a loose elevator handle, resetting a flickering hallway light, and logging every repair in the small black notebook he kept in his back pocket. Numbers, initials, missing codes. He had learned that when poor people did not keep records, other people wrote the story for them. In the locker room, his white shirt hung from a metal door, ironed but worn thin at the cuffs. His work boots sat beneath the bench. At 6:30, his cracked phone buzzed with a message from the hotel manager. "Remember, tonight you're not staff. You are a guest. Don't embarrass us." Malcolm looked at the screen, then at Lila's paper rose tucked inside his wallet. If he stayed downstairs, no one could laugh at him. If he went upstairs, one wrong moment could follow his daughter into school by morning. Then another message arrived from Lila. "Save me your seat, Daddy." Malcolm stared at Lila's message until the screen dimmed in his hand. "Save me your seat, Daddy." Downstairs, there was safety, a locker, a toolbox, and a supervisor who already treated him like one mistake away from being replaceable. Upstairs, there was a ballroom full of donors who could decide whether Lila painted in a real studio next year or kept drawing on printer paper at the kitchen table. Malcolm slipped the cracked phone into his pocket, folded the paper rose deeper into his wallet, and put on the white shirt he had ironed until the worn cuffs almost shined. The private elevator to the gala had brass doors and a guard with an earpiece who looked at Malcolm's work shoes before he looked at the invitation. "Deliveries go through service," the guard said. Malcolm did not blink. He held out the cream-colored card with the Whitcomb Foundation seal. "I was invited through the front door," he said quietly. "If I'm asked to leave, I'll leave through it too." The guard read his name twice, as if the letters might rearrange themselves into someone easier to accept. Then he stepped aside. The elevator lifted without a sound, carrying Malcolm away from mop water, hot metal, and the service corridor into a lobby washed in gold light. The doors opened to marble floors, polished glass, expensive perfume, and a wall of white roses arranged so perfectly they looked untouched by human hands. A woman in a silver dress turned, placed an empty champagne flute in Malcolm's hand, and said, "Could you take this, please?" He took it, because letting it fall would only give the room what it wanted. Then he set on a tray and kept walking. At the registration table, a young assistant searched for his name with the careful smile of someone trained not to show surprise. "Malcolm Hayes," he said. Her finger stopped halfway down the guest list. Beside his name was a small mark in red ink. Not printed, added. She glanced toward the ballroom doors before sliding him a badge that read community guest. The words were smaller than every corporate title around him, but large enough to be seen. Malcolm pinned it straight. Across the room, Preston Whitcomb laughed with two board members near the bar, one hand resting on a stack of red seating cards. His tuxedo fit like power had been tailored into it. When he noticed Malcolm, his smile did not widen. It sharpened. "Mr. Hayes," Preston called too loudly. Several heads turned. "How generous of you to join us tonight." Malcolm understood the word generous. It was not welcome. It was a warning dressed as manners. Before he could answer, the lights softened and the blind date dinner began. Names were drawn from glass bowls. People applauded at pairings that pleased them and whispered at the ones that did not. Malcolm stood near the edge of the room, feeling his phone buzz once in his pocket, knowing it might be Lila, knowing he could not look without appearing nervous. Then he saw Evelyn Whitcomb. She sat beneath the chandelier in a red dress, alone at the central table, while her own foundation's guests spoke around her instead of to her. Her chin was lifted, her face still, but one gloved hand tightened around her napkin each time Preston mentioned new leadership from the stage. She looked powerful from a distance and cornered up close. Preston lifted the next red card, paused just long enough for the room to feel it, and read Malcolm's name. Then he looked at Evelyn. A ripple passed through the ballroom before anyone laughed. Malcolm stepped forward, and as he passed the registration table, he saw something beneath the red mark beside his name. Another table number, scratched out but not erased. The scratched-out table number stayed in Malcolm's mind, even as Preston read his name to the room. It had not been a printing mistake. The old number was still there beneath the red ink, pressed hard enough to scar the paper. When Malcolm reached Evelyn's table, the second red card waited beside her plate like it had been placed for a camera, not a guest. Charity seat. 2 words. 1 trap. Malcolm covered them with his palm before Evelyn could read them, but under his thumb he saw something else. The yellow rose seal printed on the corner, the same seal on Lila's scholarship form. Only this one sat slightly crooked, like it had been copied by someone in a hurry. Evelyn's voice came low beside him. "You saw what they wrote, didn't you?" Malcolm did not answer right away. Around them, the laughter began to thin, not because anyone felt ashamed, but because people realized he was not reacting the way they had expected. A man with a phone leaned closer. The woman in silver whispered behind her glass. Preston remained near the stage, still smiling, but his eyes had narrowed on the card beneath Malcolm's hand. Malcolm pulled the chair back slowly and sat, keeping the red card covered. "Some things don't need to be repeated to be understood," he said. Evelyn looked at him then, really looked, not with warmth, not with trust, but with the guarded attention of a woman who had spent years learning the difference between pity and respect. Her gloved fingers rested beside her fork. One finger tapped once against the tablecloth. "Most people would have thrown it back at him," she said. Malcolm glanced toward Preston. "That would make it about me." The words were soft, but they landed hard enough that the guest nearest him stopped chewing. For the first time all night, Evelyn's expression shifted. Not gratitude. Something smaller. A pause where certainty used to be. Preston crossed the room before that pause could grow. "Mr. Hayes," he said, bright enough for the surrounding tables to hear. "Careful with the seating materials. Those are part of the program records." He reached for the red card. Malcolm did not pull it away. He only lifted his palm enough for Preston to see the corner, the scratched-out number, the pressure marks in red ink. "Program records usually don't get corrected by hand after printing," Malcolm said. Preston's smile stayed in place, but color moved under his collar. The young assistant from registration appeared behind him, holding a tablet against her chest like a shield. Preston turned without taking his eyes off Malcolm. "Collect the cards after the first course," he said. "All of them." Evelyn's eyes moved from Preston's face to the card, then back to Malcolm's hand. "Leave this one," she said. It was not an apology. It was not trust. It was a command sharp enough to cut the air for 1 second. The assistant froze. Preston's smile tightened. "Of course," he said, but his phone was already in his hand beneath the table edge. Malcolm felt his own phone buzz in his pocket. Not Lila this time. A message from his supervisor lit the cracked screen. "Step away from Mrs. Wickham now, or your shift record gets reviewed in the morning." For one breath, it looked as if the room might choose silence over cruelty. Evelyn's command hung over the table, sharp and clean. "Leave this one." The assistant stopped reaching for the red card. Preston's fingers froze above it. Even the man with the phone lowered his screen half an inch, as if the old woman in red had reminded everyone whose name was carved into the foundation walls. Malcolm kept his hand near the card, not touching it now, only guarding the space around it. The scratched-out number, the crooked yellow rose seal, the cruel words beneath the bend in the paper, all of it sat between them like something small enough to ignore and dangerous enough to hide. Evelyn turned to the assistant. "Bring me the original seating ledger." The young woman swallowed. "Mrs. Wickham," Mr. Preston said, "all records are digital tonight." Evelyn's eyes moved to Preston. A tiny crack opened in the polished air. Then Preston smiled. "A harmless mix-up," he said. And I'm sure Mr. Hayes doesn't want to make the evening about a seating card. The sentence was soft, but every person at the table heard the blade inside it. Malcolm felt his phone buzz again. Then again. He did not look until Evelyn's gaze shifted away from him, giving him one private second. The cracked screen showed 3 missed calls from his supervisor and 1 message from Lila's after-school neighbor. Is everything okay? Lila saw something online. Malcolm's thumb hovered, then another notification slid across the screen. A short video. The thumbnail showed him standing beside Evelyn's chair, his white shirt bright against the black tuxedos, the red card just visible near his hand. The caption read, "Whitcomb founder chooses charity case at blind date." His stomach tightened, but his face did not change. Across the table, a woman in pearls laughed under her breath as the same clip reached her phone. Another guest tilted his screen toward his wife. The laughter came back different this time. Quieter. Meaner. Evelyn heard it before she saw it. Preston leaned down beside her chair, his voice low enough to sound protective and loud enough for Malcolm to understand. This is exactly why the board worries about optics. Evelyn's gloved hand closed around her napkin. She looked at Malcolm, and for 1 second he saw the battle inside her. Instinct against training, dignity against reputation, doubt against the machinery of the room. She did not apologize. She did not defend him. Not yet. Malcolm slipped his phone back into his pocket. Lila had seen him being laughed at. That was the part that hurt. Not the caption. Not the rich strangers. His daughter, somewhere across the city, holding a screen and wondering why her father had become a joke. Preston reached for the red card again. We'll remove this before it causes more confusion. Malcolm placed 2 fingers on the edge of the card. Calm. Steady. Confusion didn't write those words. The table went still. Preston's smile disappeared for the first time. Careful, he said. Malcolm looked at him, then toward the ballroom doors, where his supervisor now stood near security with a tablet in his hand. If I walk away every time a room laughs, Malcolm said, my daughter learns the laugh as law. Evelyn's eyes lifted sharply at that. But before she could speak, Preston bent close to Malcolm's shoulder and murmured, "Step into the hallway, Mr. Hayes. There's a version of tonight where a little girl keeps her scholarship, and you still have a job tomorrow." Preston did not wait for Malcolm to answer. He guided him into the glass hallway beside the ballroom with a hand that never quite touched his back, the way powerful men move people while pretending not to push. Behind them, Evelyn remained at the table, the red card still beside her plate, held in place by one gloved finger. Security stood near the doors. Malcolm's supervisor watched from a wall with a tablet tucked against his chest. Preston lowered his voice. "This can stay a misunderstanding," he said. "You sign a short incident statement, admit you misread the seating card, and go home." Malcolm looked through the glass at the chandelier light spilling over Evelyn's red dress. From here, the ballroom looked clean again, like cruelty could disappear if the floor was polished enough. Preston slipped a folded page from inside his jacket. At the top was the Whitcomb Grand letterhead. Beneath it, 2 lines had already been written. Guest became disruptive after being assigned to Mrs. Evelyn Whitcomb. Guest refused to surrender event materials. Malcolm read it once. Then he saw the smaller sentence near the bottom. Community scholarship review pending. His jaw tightened, but his voice stayed quiet. "You wrote the ending before the night was over." Preston smiled without warmth. "I'm offering you a better ending than the one you're walking toward." He held out a pen. Red ink. The same shade Malcolm had seen across the scratched-out table number. The same pressure marks on the card. The small detail struck harder than a shout. Malcolm's thumb moved inside his pocket until it found the edge of Lila's paper rose folded in his wallet. Preston noticed. "Your daughter's application is strong," he said. "It would be unfortunate if the committee had to question her father's judgment." There it was. Not anger. Not embarrassment. A door with both handles removed. If Malcolm signed, he might keep his job through mourning and protect Lila's scholarship from a man who should never have been able to threaten it. But Evelyn would be left at that table with a lie beside her plate. If he refused, the room would not just laugh. It would write him into a report. Malcolm looked at the paper again. "A clean exit that requires a lie," he said, "is still a dirty door." Preston's face hardened. Inside the ballroom, Evelyn had risen halfway from her chair. A board member leaned toward her, speaking quickly, one hand raised as if procedure itself had a voice. She looked from Preston to Malcolm through the glass, and for the first time, doubt showed plainly on her face. Not trust, not courage. Doubt. Enough to hurt. Enough to matter. The assistant appeared behind Evelyn with the tablet, pale beneath the ballroom lights. Malcolm saw her mouth move. Evelyn's hand stopped above the red card. Preston saw it too. His body turned before his smile could catch up. No one asked you to retrieve anything. He snapped through the open doorway. The assistant flinched but held the tablet tighter. Mrs. Whitcomb asked for the original seating ledger. A thin silence spread. Malcolm could hear the muted clink of silverware, the low hum of music, his own phone vibrating again in his pocket. He did not look. He already knew Lila was waiting somewhere on the other end of it. Evelyn's eyes dropped to the red card, then lifted to Malcolm. "Bring it here," she said. Preston stepped between them. There is no original ledger. But the tablet screen lit in the assistant's hands, and Malcolm saw one line before security moved closer. Malcolm Hayes, table 12. Preston turned sharply to the guard. "Then we have a bigger problem," he said. "Someone accessed restricted records." The accusation landed before the proof could breathe. Restricted records. Someone accessed restricted records. Preston turned one clean line on the tablet into a crime scene, and the room almost followed him there. Malcolm Hayes, table 12, still glowed in black type on the assistant screen, small but undeniable, and for half a second the air changed. Evelyn leaned forward. A board member stopped whispering. Even the man with the phone lowered it, as if the truth had finally stepped into the room wearing no tuxedo at all. Malcolm had not been assigned to Evelyn's table. The red card had not merely insulted him. It had moved him. Then Preston pointed at the assistant. "Who told you to open that file?" The young woman went pale. Mrs. Whitcomb asked for the ledger. After speaking with him, Preston said, turning the word him into an accusation. Security moved closer. Not fast enough to look violent. Fast enough to make everyone understand who the room was prepared to believe. Malcolm did not step back. His eyes went to the red seat card beside Evelyn's plate, the little square of paper that had started as a joke and become a weapon. His supervisor pushed through from the ballroom doors with the stiff relief of a man who had found someone lower than himself to blame. "Malcolm," he said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear, "you're done for tonight. Badge and access card." The words hit harder than laughter. Rent was due Friday. Lila's scholarship sat inside the same foundation machine that had just turned a seating card into evidence. His phone vibrated again. This time he answered. For 1 second, there was only a child's breathing. Then Lila's voice came through, small and careful. "Daddy, are they making you leave?" Malcolm closed his eyes once. Preston watched. Evelyn watched too, caught between the red card, the tablet, and a lifetime of men telling her procedure was safer than instinct. "I might be late," Malcolm said gently, "but I'm still your father." Lila swallowed on the other end. "Did you do something wrong?" Malcolm looked at the red pen in Preston's hand, the incident statement waiting in the hallway, and the security guard reaching for his badge. "No, baby," he said. "I just didn't sign something wrong to make things easier." The line went quiet. Then Lila whispered, "Mom would say look them in the eye." Malcolm took the badge from his jacket and placed it on the hallway table. Then he removed Lila's crooked paper rose from his wallet and walked back to Evelyn's table before security could block him. Preston's voice sharpened. "Do not approach Mrs. Whitcomb again." Malcolm stopped at a respectful distance and set the paper rose beside the red seat card. 2 reds, one made as shame, one made by a child who still believed a seat meant welcome. "If I leave now," Malcolm said, "my daughter may lose a scholarship. But if that card disappears, every child after her loses something worse." He turned before anyone could call it begging. Security took his arm. Evelyn did not save him. She only looked down. The paper rose had unfolded slightly, and a yellow imprint from Lila's scholarship seal touched the crooked yellow seal on the red card like a question neither paper could answer. Behind her, the assistant's tablet chimed again. One file remained open, seating ledger, edit history. The tablet chimed again, and the little line at the top changed the shape of the room. Seating ledger, edit history. The assistant stared at it as if the screen had spoken out of turn. Evelyn saw it. Preston saw it. Malcolm saw it too, standing with security's hand on his arm, while Lila's paper rose lay beside the red seat card like a child's answer to an adult insult. For 1 second, no one moved. Then Evelyn's voice cut through the ballroom. Put on the screen. A board member rose halfway from his chair. Evelyn, this is not the proper procedure. She did not look at him. Neither is humiliating a guest with my name on the wall. The assistant connected the tablet with shaking fingers. Behind the stage, above the white roses and champagne towers, the ledger appeared in blue-white light. The first entry was simple. Malcolm Hayes, table 12. 5 minutes later, his name had been moved to founder table. Then came the edited label, charity seat. Beside every change was the same administrator tag. P. Wickham. The silence arrived so fast, it felt physical. Preston moved first. Administrative tags can be duplicated, he said, too quickly. This proves someone tampered with the system. Malcolm looked at the screen, then at the red pen still trapped between Preston's fingers. He did not smile. He did not ask the room for pity. Then check the card, he said. Not the words. The pressure marks. Evelyn looked down. The ink on the red seat card had been pressed so hard it left grooves through the paper. The assistant, suddenly understanding, lifted the scratched registration card from her table and held both cards beneath the light. Same slant, same drag, same red pressure carved through the number 12. Preston's polish began to crack. The screen scrolled again. Another file had been opened under the same administrator tag 12 minutes after Malcolm's seat was moved. Youth Arts Scholarship Transfer Packet. Malcolm's eyes narrowed. He stepped forward only 1 pace, security still beside him. That seal is wrong. Several heads turned as if the maintenance supervisor had spoken above his station. Malcolm reached slowly into his jacket so every hand in the room could see him. He took out Lila's scholarship form, creased from being carried all day, and placed it beside the red card and the paper rose. 2 yellow roses. 1 clean and centered. 1 crooked, copied almost right. My daughter's form came from the Real Foundation office, Malcolm said. That packet didn't. Preston laughed once, but it broke in the middle. He fixes elevators. Now he's a foundation auditor. Malcolm's voice stayed low. Poor people read fine print because mistakes don't land softly on us. Evelyn turned from Malcolm to the screen, then to Preston. The woman in red looked older in that moment, but not weaker. More awake. Stop security, she said. Lock the transfer packet. Preserve the footage. Remove my nephew's administrative access now. Preston stepped back as if the floor had shifted under him. The man with the phone was still recording, but nobody was laughing anymore. On the screen, the final edit appeared with a timestamp from minutes before the blind date game began. Founder optic seat adjustment. Evelyn looked at those words, then at Malcolm, then at the little paper Rose's daughter had made. Mr. Hayes, she said, her voice carrying to every table. You asked if you could sit here. She swallowed once. Facing the room she had allowed to grow comfortable with silence. Now I'm asking if you will stand here while we finish telling the truth. Malcolm looked toward the ballroom doors, where his badge, his job, and his daughter's waiting call still hung in the balance. Malcolm looked toward the ballroom doors, where his badge, his job, and his daughter's waiting call still hung in the balance. The room had gone quiet, but quiet was not the same as justice. Security released his arm first. Then his supervisor lowered the tablet against his chest, suddenly fascinated by the marble floor. Preston tried to speak, but Evelyn lifted one hand, and for the first time that night, the people around her obeyed silence instead of using it against her. Mr. Hayes was not disruptive, she said, her voice steady enough to reach the back tables. He was correct. She turned to the board members. His employment record will not be touched. His daughter's scholarship review will be removed from Preston's office tonight. And every transfer packet opened under that administrator tag will be audited before this foundation signs another check. It was not a gift. It was a correction. Malcolm understood the difference. Preston's face tightened as two security officers stepped beside him. No rough hands, no spectacle, just the quiet removal of a man who had mistaken access for ownership. The guests who had laughed now looked at their plates, their phones, their folded napkins, anywhere but at the man they had almost helped destroy. Evelyn picked up the red seat card with 2 fingers. The same card that had made him a joke. The same card that had nearly cost him his job. Then she placed it beside Lila's paper rose and turned both objects toward the room. One of these was made to make someone small, she said. The other was made by a child who knew better than all of us. Malcolm's phone buzzed again. This time, the sound did not feel like a threat. He looked down and saw Lila's name glowing through the cracked screen. Evelyn stepped back, giving him space no one in that room had given him all night. Malcolm answered quietly. "Hey, baby." Lila's voice was small, careful. "Are they still laughing?" Malcolm looked across the ballroom. The man with the phone had lowered it. The woman in pearls was wiping at nothing on her plate. His supervisor still could not meet his eyes. "No," Malcolm said. "Not anymore." There was a pause. Then Lila asked, "Did you save me a seat?" Malcolm's throat tightened. He looked at the red card lying beside her crooked paper rose. "Yes," he said, "but you saved me first." Evelyn picked up the red card again. She did not offer money. She did not make a speech about kindness. She turned the card over, wrote one line in black ink, and handed it to Malcolm with both hands. On the back, beneath the pressure marks, it read, "No seat at my table will ever be used to shame someone again." "Please take that to your daughter," Evelyn said, "and tell her the adults in this room are still learning." Malcolm accepted the card, but not like a prize. Like evidence. Like a boundary. Like something that had cost too much to become decoration. Behind them, the board chair ordered the gala footage preserved, the edited clip corrected publicly, and the scholarship files frozen until an outside review could protect every child attached to them. Malcolm did not smile big. He did not raise his voice. He simply placed the red card beside Lila's paper rose inside his wallet and stood straight in the same room that had expected him to shrink. Have you ever been misunderstood while trying to do the right thing? Would you have signed the lie to protect your child for one more day? Or would you have stayed and paid the price? Leave where you're watching from in the comments, and subscribe for more stories about people the world underestimated before it learned their names. When Malcolm walked out, the ballroom stayed behind him, bright and quiet, and the red card rested beside the paper rose like proof that dignity does not need to shout to be seen.